Thank you for joining us today for TNP's special webinar on how employers can support employees who are affected by the recent California wildfires. We're so appreciative today to have Ann Laguza, president of the Works Consulting, here with us today to share on some great tips on how we can best support our employees and our team members who are affected by these fires. So Ann, thank you so much for joining us today. Just a few housekeeping items to take us through our session for today. On the screen, you see TNP's mission and our vision. We appreciate you so much for allowing us to be a partner in meeting your mission and your mission's goals. On the screen, you also see a variety of ways in which TNP can support you or your organization. If you're looking for a custom support project on any of the topics that you see on your screen today, we would love to work with you. Please connect with us over at TNP. For today's session, we will be holding this virtually. We ask that you do rename your video panel with your name and your organization. It helps us to better connect with you and answer your questions directly. And while you're not required to be on video, you can certainly go behind video. Please do keep your video on mute, so that way we cut down on cross noise. If you like these sessions, we do hope to see you for some of our future events as well. We will be launching our nonprofit marketing certificate program later this week. And in just a couple weeks, we will have Ann Laguza and Usama Koff returning for our annual HR and legal updates. So we're excited to see you hopefully in a couple weeks. And thank you so much for joining us today. We do appreciate you joining us and being a partner with the Nonprofit Partnership. For now, we're going to launch things over and hand things over to Ann Laguza to take us through those tips for how we can support our employees who are affected by these fires. Ann?
Thank you. Okay, good morning, everyone. As they mentioned so wonderfully, I was getting a lot of questions last week, and I thought, okay, this is another one of those times that we have a high emotion situation that's affecting way more people than anybody ever thought it would affect. And we need to put some of that into that unfortunate, I don't want to say it's unfortunate, but we kind of got to get that objective feel around it as in terms of employment, because a lot of times in these situations that are high emotion, which if you're not directly affected, you can completely empathize with someone who's affected. We tend to say things like, take whatever time you need or do whatever you need to do, not realizing that this could be 2 months, 6 months, a year. And then as things start to normalize, whatever that looks like, as employers, sometimes we're like, well, I didn't mean that long. I meant like a couple of days. So I kind of have 8 sort of tips for you of things that I think you need to start thinking about as employers. I'm going to be very honest, because we did put this together pretty last minute. They're not necessarily in any particular order, if you will. I tried to make them make some sense. So if you ask a question of something that's coming up, I'll let you know it's coming up, and then we can dig in deeper to your question. And then of course there'll be time for you to ask questions, but I based it on the questions we're getting right now, things that I think you need to think about in times like this, some things that are going to maybe be more obvious and some things that are not that obvious. So that's where we're going to go. There are no slides for today, so I'll talk as slow as I can, but if you need me to repeat something, by all means, you just do that. So take good notes, and it is being recorded, which is good. So I think one of the first places to start is just think about determining how you're going to handle as many situations as you can in advance, whenever possible. And I'll give you some examples. So we have people who have loss of their home. We have people who have been evacuated. We have people who have loss of power and or resources. We have someone who has a close person who's had loss of a home, evacuated, loss of power. We have people of general fear. Just it's a lot. And if you're spending any large amounts of time on social media or with the news or however you get your information, there's a flood of information. I mean, I know even for myself, I'm allowed to check in the morning and I'm allowed to check at the end of the day. I have a nephew that's in the area, so I check on him pretty regularly. But that's all I do, because I could watch videos all day long, and some, as we all know, are great information and some are misinformation, and some are in the middle, right? Somewhere in the middle follows the truth, I think. And then you're going to need to think about all of those things that might be happening to your team. And those are just some examples. You might have other thoughts. And then we're going to have to think about it in terms of our exempt employees and our non-exempt employees, because as you know, they are compensated differently. So you're going to want to think about, okay, so what's like kind of our procedure going to be for these possible issues that you may already know today, but you might also be thinking about just in case. I know, they are talking about some additional winds coming up and what that might challenges that might present. So we might not be at the end. I know today it's looking a lot better than when I reached out to TNP last week, but as we know, it's not the end. So start, whoever on your team needs to be thinking about those things and start saying, okay, what are the requests that we might get and how are we going to think about response? What's our response going to be to these requests? And I'm going to give you some help with that. So the very first thing I want to tell you, and no matter what anybody requests of you, a day off, a month off, pay, benefits, whatever the request is, I want you to feel comfortable to say, thank you so much for asking that question. If you don't know the answer, by the way, if you've already worked out the answer, you know the answer. But if you're not sure, then I would say, thank you so much for making that request. I need some time to determine the appropriate solution, and I'm going to get back to you and give them a date and time. So you can say that anytime. Thank you so much for bringing that request forward. Very good question. I'm going to need some time to think about what our correct solution or what our solution is going to be to that, and I'll get back to you. You may need 30, 60 minutes to think about it, and you could tell them you'll get back to them. You may tell them you're going to get back to them in 24 hours, and you might need to provide a short-term solution, right? So if I'm saying, can I work from home XYZ, and you haven't thought through the situation yet, you can say, you know what, I'll go ahead and let you work from home today, but I actually need to think about a longer term solution. So I'll be in touch with you before tomorrow morning or something like that. So if you feel that you need to provide some response, put a limit on it of what you're granting, right? I can grant that for today. And I need to think about this long term and what our solution is long term. So the most important thing for you all is to make sure you're taking time to really think about it, especially if it's something that hasn't crossed your mind yet. It's something new, or you haven't at this point taken any time to really think through the scenarios and you're already starting to get requests. It's okay to take time. It's okay to give them a limited answer. It's okay up for all of that. But I do want you to tell them when they will hear from you, because that will be where the anxiety starts to produce, right? Like, well, I need to think about it and I'll get back to you. And the employee's like, well, is that today? Is that tomorrow? Do I need to come in? And what's the answer? So it's like, I need to find out. And that's totally okay. And then this will start helping you prepare for other scenarios. What I don't want you to do is make those emotional decisions in the moment where we feel so terrible for the situation the person's going through, and we're making onesie twosie decisions, because you need to think about your entire team and how everybody might be impacted and what makes the most sense for the entire team. You might break it down by position, right? You might have some opportunities for people at the management level that are not available for people who are not at a management level. Like I said, you might have different things available for exempt versus non-exempt. So those are all things you need to work through and make sure that you have thought those through and you're not answering emotionally at the moment. But like I said, if they need something immediate at that moment, they need to know that it's okay that they're not coming in today. By all means, give them what you need to do, but let them know that that's, a short-term answer and then when they're going to hear from you. People's right now, you should all be thinking about what are temporary policies and procedures that you need in place right now that you do not have. Do you need temporary work from home policies? And I'll explain this temporary thing. Maybe you already have work from home policies, so that's okay. But if you're an organization that's been like, you have to be in the office 3 days a week, you can only work remotely 2 days a week, and you're going to change that for a temporary time, you're going to put a temporary policy in place. You want to think about salary continuance. So we had a client who said, gosh, one of our employees lost their home. We're going to pay them for the next 3 days. We're not going to make them use their vacation or their sick leave or whatever. We're just going to pay them for 3 days. Fine, you can absolutely do that. Make sure what you're going to do for one, you're going to do for everybody in terms of loss of a home, right? But that's where that breaking it down to evacuation, is that the same if someone's evacuated, or are we just doing this if someone's home is literally lost in the fire? So you have to make those differentiations. But if you're going to do something like a salary continuance, you want to create a policy, a temporary policy. And then I'm going to talk about how to document that. Salary continuance, just so everybody knows, just means I'm going to keep paying you your regular salary. I'm not making you take from any of your accrual balances. I'm just going to pay you for the time. This does happen in times of crisis. It's not unusual. We're actually writing 2 salary continuance policies right now for our clients. But it is something a little unusual, right? It's not something we often do. So you want to think about that. Do you need a benefit continuation policy? Employees have to work a minimum of 30 hours a week to be eligible for their health benefits. Are you going to make any kind of exception to that for a short time? So we might need to, put that in writing. You might decide we want a personal leave of absence policy for this emergency situation that we're in. So, an extenuating circumstance, a natural disaster, we're going to put together a personal leave policy. It doesn't mean the employee is medically not well. It just means they have a situation right now that's limiting them from being able to work. So, typically those are unpaid, right? But what is it going to do for them? Are you going to extend that for 30 days? Are you going to extend that for 2 weeks? Are you going to continue their health benefits during that time? So you need to think about those things, right? So it's another option of what you're doing to help your team members out that might need it. How will they apply for it, right? Who do they ask for they're not going to have documentation per se, but who do they ask that for? How are you letting them use vacation? Are you letting them use PTO? Are you letting them use sick time? I mean, vacation and PTO are pretty easy, but sick time technically doesn't cover an emergency situation like that. Would I maybe think about letting my team use their sick leave if that's what they have available? Sure, I probably would, to be quite honest. So we need to think about that. Are we making an exception? Again, every exception you're going to make should be in writing though, and for a limited time, right? And I would say do more limited to start and then review it periodically. So I might say from January 13th to, I might even just go to the end of this month, but to January 31st, here's what we're doing, right? We're doing this, we're doing that. And on January 31st or that week, we will review it and we will see if we will extend that or if it's going to be finished. And that's what I mean. Like, we don't know at this point how long people are going to be affected, who's going to be affected. And I want you to maintain very clearly to employees that we understand there's an emergency situation. We're responding to that emergency situation, but we're not sort of guaranteeing this forever and ever and ever. We're putting a shelf life on it, and we'll keep reviewing it as the situation develops to see what makes the most sense. And I just actually said my next point. So every situation should have an expiration date. Make sure you don't promise indefinitely. Please try not to say take whatever time you need, take as long as you need, because again, you have a number in your head. If I asked everybody to define that, everybody would have a number, and an employee will translate that as truly as much time as they need. For some of them, that might be months. They might need, depending on how it's impacted them, this could have very long-term effects. And you might not mean 6 months. You might not mean, I'm going to hold your job open for 6 months. You might be thinking a week or 2 weeks or maybe even 30 days. Every exception. So that was point. So number 1, determine how you're going to handle as many situations as you can think of. Number 2 is just making sure you thank people for bringing things to your attention and taking thoughtful time to consider your response. Number 3 was to develop those temporary policies and procedures. Number 4 is all exceptions go in writing. So if I put together a temporary policy on a personal leave of absence, I'm going to put in writing when the employee's on a personal leave of absence. If I am going to let somebody work from home more days than we normally do, I have a policy, and then I'm going to put that in writing. This, is to confirm that you've been granted the, approval to work from home 5 days a week, whatever the situation might be. I'm not going to worry about employee signatures on this. Just put it like in a memo format, like to the employee from whoever it should be from regarding, and then just put in writing what you're authorizing for them, the dates that it's being authorized. Make sure to include your at-will statement in that document that you do remain an at-will employer, assuming you all are at-will employers, which I think everybody here is. The start date, the end date, and then keep a copy of that in the employee file. You can email it to your employees as an attachment, like a PDF attachment. That's fine. Keep a copy of that email that you sent it with the document in their employee file. So that'll be your proof of submission. I'm not worried about people signing those things at this point. If you have an easy way for people to do an electronic signature and it's not too much of a hassle, by all means, they can sign receipt that they've received it. But I don't want you to get hung up on that's going to prohibit you from notifying an employee of the exception you made. But every single exception should be in writing. Salary continuance in writing, schedule change in writing, remote work in writing. Whatever you're doing, you have the temporary policy or procedure, and you also put it in writing to the employee so there's no misunderstanding. The clarity that needs to happen in communication at this time is incredibly high because emotions are high. And that is when we need the best, most clear communication possible. And that's why verbally is great. Putting it in writing really helps somebody review and understand and reference when they get off a call with you and maybe think that they heard one thing that you said, but you actually said something else. So make sure you do all that. Okay, let's talk about leaves of absence for a second. So something I want to tell you is anybody that is directly affected by this situation may very well be eligible for a leave of absence due to their own serious health condition. Knock on wood, I'm a very superstitious person, but I have not been through this kind of situation before, but I can imagine what it must feel like. I can just empathize maybe with the emotions that are coming with it. And I am sure that a medical provider would take this employee off work for a certain period of time to navigate their emotions. So you can say that to your employee. You can say, hey, listen, I think that you might be eligible. If you have 5 or more employees, they would be eligible for California Family Rights Act for their own serious health condition. If you have 50 or more employees, we're going to run Family Medical Leave Act at the same time, but they may be eligible for a leave of absence. So I would say, you know what, listen, we're going to grant you a personal leave or whatever you're doing. And what I'm going to suggest is that you get to your medical provider as soon as you can, because I think that there might be additional leave available for you. Now, they might not want to do that, and that's okay, but it is a benefit to them to do it because it protects their job, their health benefits for an extended period of time for up to 3 months. And we just did that recently with an employee, and they thanked us. They said, thank you so much for telling me that. I'm going to call my doctor right now. Great. Do that. Just get us the documentation and we'll figure out what kind of leave you're eligible for. So some of your folks might be eligible for a leave due to their own serious health condition, just meaning that, and again, whatever that's between their and their doctor. I'm not telling them what's wrong with them. I'm not telling them that they need medical treatment. I'm just saying you might be eligible for a medical leave based on the fact that this is a significant situation that has impacted you. So if you want to go have a conversation with your doctor, you might want to do that. Because they might take you off work. I'm not going to, if anybody has any specific questions, we can get into the leave details, but it's a little more complicated discussion, but we can definitely talk about that. Okay, number 6 is that you're going to just have to get really comfortable with having uncomfortable conversations. This is not comfortable. You are an employer or a leader, not the therapist. Even if you are a trained therapist, you're not this employee's therapist. So remember we want to be always appropriately empathetic, but we also want to remember where our boundaries are, which get very complicated in these types of situations. There's a lot of pressure on employers to know all the right things and to do all the right things. Nobody knows what the right thing is to do. We're all just doing the best we can do. That's why I always want you to take time to think through things and understand that you're in this role, you're the leader, you're the employer. You're not their therapist. Now, we're going to talk about that if they need some additional assistance, what you could do for them, but you're going to do your best to empathize and to provide the best possible solutions you can at this time, understanding what your role is, but you're just going to really have to get comfortable with having some uncomfortable conversations, because this is a tough thing to talk about, and it's hard to yeah, it's just tough. It's tough because there's a lot of feelings around it, and I totally understand. And I mean, I'm sitting here, I just had a conversation with my team this morning. I'm like, I'm not even sure what my right answer would be. I don't all my team lives in Long Beach currently, and I'm grateful for that. And I'm not sure if one of them had been affected, what my reaction would have been, but I would have had to think of that through for sure. Number 7 is act as with as much compassion as you can. Keep in mind you've got an entire team, likely. Some of you have a smaller team, some of you have a larger team, but you want to think about everybody, right? Because so some people might be eligible for some specific exceptions. What about the rest of the team that might be picking up additional work? Again, they will feel great about doing that right now, but if this extends out to a month, 2 months, etc., depending on what's going on with the employee, you will find some resentment start to surface. You might even get claims of it not being fair. Even though that might sound absolutely wild to you right now, it does happen. So you want to just keep thinking like, I want to act with compassion. I want to be empathetic to this situation, and I have to keep thinking about the entire team. So communicate as much as you can in advance with specific procedures, policies, anything you're implementing temporarily. Be upfront with everybody, right? This is what we're doing. Not, I'm having all these private conversations. Hey, if you now have a personal leave of absence policy temporarily for people who have been through this natural disaster, communicate that to everybody. We have this temporary policy in place. It's in place for 2 weeks. We're going to review it after 2 weeks, see if we're going to extend it. But this is what we're doing. So everyone knows what you're doing. And then the other part that I think is tough, but I want you to think about is consider limiting discussions that become disruptive during work time. We cannot say what people are going to talk about breaks or lunch period, but if you find that everyone's telling a story about someone that they knew, or they knew someone who knows someone who knows someone, that takes its toll day after day, right? Of hearing stories. I heard so many stories in the last 3 days, like from people who weren't even directly impacted, right? But they had heard about someone who heard about someone. I heard from people in other states. And I just, I had to put sort of a break on all that because I just could not handle all the stories of devastation all day long. It was too much. So think about that. Like, are you going to do a check-in meeting every morning? Are you going to do hey, we just want to check in. How's everybody feeling today? Is there anything that's weighing on somebody that they need to share? If that's your type of organization, right? You might be like, that's not us. We don't do that stuff. Okay, fine. But thinking about that, maybe asking your leaders to keep an extra ear out to someone who's telling a lot of stories about things they're hearing on the news, things that they're hearing about others. And maybe we're going to ask them if they can kind of tailor that in a little bit, right? Because it may not be helpful. There might be something about them that it's helpful for to talk about, and that's where we might want to encourage them to seek some resources that we have available, but it may not be helpful to others, and it might be sort of very disruptive to the workplace, and we want to be thoughtful about that. I haven't met one single person yet that isn't compassionate about the situation, but I also, I'm always ready for anything. I'm always ready for someone who doesn't really understand. I mean, I will tell you all, I was in Orange County last week for a couple of days, and someone said something like, "How are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, it was a little bit of a tough morning." And they said, "Oh, really? Why?" And I said, "Well, we're having a lot of clients who are really impacted by the fires in LA." And I'm not kidding you, but this person was like, "Oh, really?" Like, I was like, wow, that was a different reaction than I expected. So there are people who feel differently, and I can't assume that everyone's going to have the same feeling or the same compassion or the same understanding. So just think about that. Just again, it's another thing to think through. Maybe you're not like, we don't have to run out of the gate with a policy about how we're talking about this, but it's like, hey, if this starts to get disruptive, it starts to feel like it's taking a lot of time from everyone's days. How do we want to do that? Do we want to give them a place to park all those questions and concerns, like with a meeting? Do we just want to let it go on until we hear from someone that it's a concern? Do we want to ask them to sort of, tailor it in a little bit and maybe try to keep the discussions away from that for the most part, unless they're on their break or meal period? Like, so you'll have to figure that out, what's best for your team. I know a lot of you on here, obviously, and I know some of you have built-in vehicles for tough situations like this, and others are like, we don't normally come across this kind of thing. So you're going to have to do what's best for you. The number 8, and then I'm going to be open to whatever questions and anything I missed and all the things, are resources and donations. So I think you have to be thoughtful about where you're recommending people go to get help, because you want to be thinking about where you're putting your stamp of approval as an organization. So do I think it might be helpful to have a list of resources and say something at the top like, we're not endorsing any of these, we're just trying to be helpful? Absolutely. I know there's a great organization in Orange County. Their initials are CFI. I can find out what they're called, but CFI provides low to no cost mental health services, right? I know they do them remotely, so no one needs to drive to Orange County. Obviously, they're not affected right now, so that might be a great resource. But would I say to my employees, this is the only resource? I would not. I'm thinking about, like, I know the JCC here in Long Beach, they have mental health services. So thinking about where there may be some options that you could provide resources, but not directing people all to one. Because if maybe you're more a faith-based person, and so you think people should go to this faith-based organization, but other people are not faith-based. Like, I just think you want to present yourself as neutral as possible. You're also not required to have resources, but it wouldn't be a bad idea. I think if you could put together a list of maybe some resources that people might want to have to seek out support. If you have an employee assistance program, if you have no idea what that is, call your broker today or email them and say, hey, do we have an employee assistance program? It's one where they provide free, anonymous mental health treatment. Typically, it's remote, it's online or on the phone. They also do have some in-person services. I would imagine if you don't have it, you could probably sign up for it. But I don't know that for sure. I don't know how that works. I'm also imagine they're probably getting a lot of requests right now. But if you do have that, find out so you can advertise that to your teams, right? And make sure that they know that you have this. It's free. It's for them. Usually it's for them and their family members, by the way, or anyone that lives in their household. So, hey, that might be a great thing to do. What are your mental health benefits for your health insurance? So if you offer health insurance, what are your mental health benefits? What's the copayment? Is there a specific phone number they call? Do they just use the one on their card? I might share that with my team. Hey, if anybody needs mental health services, if you're enrolled in our health insurance plan, everyone's deductible is, $30 or whatever. You get 10 visits. Here's the number you call, right? To try to schedule services. So you can definitely be helpful and supportive where people might need some guidance of where to go. The last point I want to put under resources and donations is just the other thing I think that gets really hard during this time is and y'all are probably seeing this on social media, everyone's soliciting donations, money, things. I think you need to be very thoughtful about this because I don't want your team members or you pressuring anybody to give money or to donate things. I almost don't, unless this is your mission as an organization, I don't necessarily even want you organizing it because again, there's so many feelings about who are we donating to. Some people love the Red Cross. Some people think you should help animal causes. Some people think it should be faith-based causes. There's so many things to navigate. If an employee wants to go on their own and work on their own plan and not use our organization resources, by all means they can. If someone comes to you and they legitimately have no idea where to donate things to and they're curious about that, I would suggest that they kind of go online and look up some resources and say this would be a great opportunity for you. If your organization as a whole, like let's say your organization's going to donate, we have a client who I think they just donated like over $3,000 to an organization. So they, as an employer, decided, but they didn't go around and solicit from employees. They just said, we're going to make this donation on behalf of our company. That's fine. But when it comes to like walking around and gassing people to give money, we don't want to do that. We don't want to start soliciting people. I don't know what their financial situation is. I don't know how they feel about it. Like I shared with you, I had somebody who was completely oblivious to how anybody might be having any feelings about the fires if you're not in that zone. So we don't want to require them to donate or bring things from home or anything like that. So if someone wants to coordinate that on their own, by all means, they can. If you want to direct them even to TNP, like TNP has a list, I know, of organizations that are accepting donations. If you'd like to reach out to them, and you can, because I'm not telling someone what they can't do on their own time. They can, but just as an organization, again, just making individuals contribute is a whole other thing that we want to be thoughtful about. And I think so that was number 8. So I'm going to open it up to questions, but I think the last thing I just want to say is just to say again, what I kind of said in the beginning is this is, it's a tough situation. I don't know that anybody has the right answer, but there are some things we want to start thinking about short term, and then we'll just keep addressing it as it goes. If we need to have another one of these, we need to have a Q&A, we'll do it. We'll do whatever we need to do to help you all out. But I wanted to start getting you thinking about the things that people are already asking our employers, and employers just not knowing what to say or do. Yeah.
Okay. Hey. Thank you so much for your kind of top 8 ideas and topics to kind of get us started in thinking. And thank you so much for walking us through some of the guidance behind that. This is an open space for some of those questions. If you have questions that you wanted to ask Anne, you can unmute and come on camera. We can ask them directly, or you can post it up in chat. And I know that some of it might be a little bit more private sessions or private questions too. So if it's a little bit too detailed for this space, I do want to make sure that we are recording. We don't maybe want to have that out as a recording for all of this. So we might take a few questions on the recording and then end the recording and have a few minutes off of the recording if you have something really private. So I want to just open that up for anybody in the session. And while you're maybe thinking about those questions, I'm looking to see, and I don't see anybody with a hand raised. So
I know.
And it's okay. It's all right. I know there's a lot
no
for us to think about in that space. There's a lot of information.
Yeah, absolutely.
And just as you mentioned that we are receiving a lot of information for different places to donate, and TNP is endeavoring to kind of put together one, it's like a one sheet of all the lists of resources we're having. There's so many, a lot out there. And so I will also offer that in here too. If you know of any that you think really are great indicators, we got some great links from the county, and we're hearing from our elected officials as well. But if you have one that you think really should be included on those list of resources, we're happy to do that if you're able to send those our way. We got a quick just request if we could just do a repeat of those top 8.
Yes.
So if you could do that for us, Anne, and I will continue to look at that chat.
Absolutely. I wanted to, I'm quickly, before I go through those, I wanted to give you an example of something someone asked me about. So they had an employee who did lose their home, and that employee the immediate response, because I know sometimes as things settle in, things change, but they said, I might need to relocate to Northern California because that's where my family is. And if I don't have anywhere to go here, I'm going to go there. And so like immediately the employer's like, okay, is that something that we're going to make available to them, right? Are they going to be able to work 100% remote from Northern California? There's so many things to think about, right? Like what's the minimum wage in Northern Cal, because it depends on where they are. They have a lot of times their own sick leave policies. There's other laws that apply specifically in like San Francisco, Oakland. There's some other laws. So you've got to think through those things, right? And then you might decide that it's not okay. And that's okay. for that to be your answer, right? I want to say that it's okay that you can't do everything that everyone's going to ask of you. And it might be that that employee has to move, and then we would just do it like anybody moving for any reason. It's just a voluntary resignation. You might decide, you know what, we're willing to try it for a week, right? Remember, limited time. We're willing to try it for a week. You have options available to you. I just want you to remember that. And it's also okay that you can't do every single thing that someone's asking of you. Um, that's where it's just a completely unfortunate, more than unfortunate, it's a very terrible situation. You're just going to do your best. And we have to also respect that our employees are going to do what's best for them. Okay, so here's the 8. Determine how you will handle as many potential situations in advance of requests. So running through, right? The evacuation, the loss of home, right? Loss of power. Um, have your response ready for all requests, that it's okay to say, thank you for asking. I need some time to determine the appropriate solution, and then make sure you give them a date and time and when you're going to follow up. Number 3, develop your temporary policies and procedures. I gave you a long list of potentials that you might need. Number 4 is document all exceptions in writing. So regardless of what policies and procedures you temporarily put in place, you're going to document every single thing that you grant to an employee in like a memo format's fine. Like I said, they do not have to sign it. I'm not worried about that. But we just want it well documented. So they're clear, you're clear. Think about leaves of absence and what the employee might be eligible for due to their own serious health condition. A lot of times we don't think about that in times like this. We don't think about that they definitely maybe would be eligible for some medical need. That's number 5. Number 6 is get comfortable with having the uncomfortable conversation. And you can even say that, by the way. You can say, this is a really hard conversation for me to have. But I think it's important for me to be as clear with you as possible and give you an opportunity to ask questions. Number 7, act with as much compassion as you can, but keep the entire team in mind, right? So instead of like addressing one person, then another person, then another person, think about the entire team. Think about exempt versus non-exempt. Think about, you might have more ability for people to work remotely that are in a supervisory role versus a non-supervisory role, or vice versa. So try to think about your entire team and also morale of the entire team. Again, I feel like in general, what I am finding is people are very empathetic to the situation right now. But as we all know, as time goes on, sometimes people get less and less so, especially if they're taking on more work, or they don't think it's fair, or they want to work from home and they don't have that option. And it's unfortunate that it goes there, but it does often go there. So think about the entire team. That's number 7. And then number 8 is just paying attention to resources and donations, right? How do you provide resources to your team members for support that they might want? Checking in on what resources you have available, communicating those out again to everybody, what the phone number is. Even if you're like, oh, they already have a number on the back of their card. Hey, if it's the same number, put it in an email so everybody has it. And then making sure that team members are not getting solicited for donations from other team members or from the organization. There's a whole, like I go down a whole path of the reasons you don't want to do that, but just in general, it can be very intrusive right now, and people can feel pressure to donate money or things that they don't have because someone's asking them to. And so someone by all means is allowed to, on their own time, to do whatever they'd like to do, but using your email or collecting resources at your site. Again, if that's not something you're doing as an organization, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying if we're, requiring or even heavily suggesting to employees that they bring things, we want to be very thoughtful about that and making sure no one's feeling any kind of pressure. Because sometimes even when you say no pressure, if you're the leader, there's an implied pressure, or sometimes team members start to pressure each other. So we're just trying to stay away from that. We're trying to respect everyone where they're at in their space. And then TMP has some great resources for you also.
Thank you,
Okay, gosh,
Anne,
y'all
for
are
that
like,
recap.
very good.
Appreciate that. And I'm not seeing any questions there, but I do think maybe we
Yeah.
might have a few that we want to take offline. So after that incredible recap of our 8 kind of suggestions and those topics in there, we will be ending this recording. We will make this available for everybody just as soon as we can edit it and get it out to all of you in a replay. So you'll receive this via email along with those list of resources. I'm going to close out our recording, but leave the session open for additional questions. So on behalf of everyone at TMP, we appreciate y'all. Stick around for the second portion here.